For this presentation, we will be discussing how man is an extension of the landscape. We will also show how the landscape is an extension of the man. This means that the man and the land they inhabit reflect one another. The characters and settings we will analyze go hand in hand and depend on one another. The three films we will be addressing scenes from are I Cento Passi, directed by Marco Tullio Giordana, Gomorrah, directed by Matteo Garrone, and No Country for Old Men, directed by Ethan and Joel Cohen. In I Cento Passi, we will be discussing the mountaintop scene with Peppino and Salvo, where they are discussing marriage, love, and life. Though there are other examples in the film, this scene is the prime example of how the life within Peppino reflects the life within the landscape. It can be argued that the power struggle with Peppino and the Mafia is comparable to the struggle between the natural land and the new urban developments. The scene is the first to develop a comparison with the power struggle between the natural land and its development, as well as place Peppino as an extension of the land. The natural lighting used throughout this scene adds to the natural feeling of the land and helps to accumulate the landscape surrounding. The camera is rather close up to the subjects the entire time. The grand landscape extends out in the background, showing the city, the ocean, and the vast countryside, putting man and the landscape side by side. The camera continuously cuts to different views of the subjects integrated with the land and further reflecting Peppino as an extension. Most of the sound in the scene is very conversation-based. There are subtle, natural sounds up until the end of the scene, where it is abruptly interrupted by the airplane, further accentuating the struggle between land, or Peppino, and the dominating developments, or the Mafia.
The next scene of discussion acts as a contrast to I Cento Passi. Gomorrah, based on an investigative book by Roberto Saviano that exposes the workings of the Gomorrah organization, shows direct negative influence of man on the land and vice versa. In the scene from I Cento Passi, the characters were appreciating the land around them by shooting it with a camera. This scene in Gomorrah, when two young, unhealthy men are shooting the environment around them with guns, depicts an extreme contrast between the films. In a way, Gomorrah even supports the way land is poisoned by the Mafia, the message Peppino fought so hard to spread in I Cento Passi. Because land and man reflect themselves in these films, man is also poisoned by the Mafia. This scene shows the land as dark, barren, and dirty. The lighting is natural, dim, and overall gloomy. This lighting reflects the poor health of the land. The sound in the two scenes are also very different. As we said, the sound in the scene from I Cento Passi includes peaceful natural sounds and calm conversation until it is interrupted by an airplane. The struggle symbolized by the airplane in I Cento Passi is supported in this scene from Gomorrah. The sound in this scene is discomforting, just as the airplane was. There are multiple gunshots as well as yelling between the boys. These uncomfortable sounds of struggle mirror and expand the idea that the airplane introduces. Poor health is also reflected on the boys who are screaming and shooting. They are thin and dirty. It is clear that they do not take care of the land around them, nor their own bodies. In this scene, the viewer sees that the Mafia has poisoned both the boys as well as the land, showing the reflection and effect man and land have on each other.
Finally, we will be discussing No Country for Old Men. As the film opens, we hear a dialogue from Tommy Lee Jones discussing the nostalgia of the old days.
I was sheriff of this county when I was 25 years old. Hard to believe. Grandfather was a long man.
While this dialogue begins, we see that the landscape shots are reflecting this feeling of nostalgia. As you can see, the sun begins to rise over shots of the beauty of the American Southwest. In addition, we do not see a barren landscape. Instead, the land is filled with typical vegetation of the Southwest, such as straw grass, bushes, etc.
I always like to hear about the old timers. Never missed a chance to do so. You can't help but compare yourself.
We also start to see a lot more things among the landscape that the man has built, and being there within peace with this landscape. We can see from the fences and the windmill as well.
My arrest and my testimony. He killed a 14-year-old girl. Paper said it was.
However, as the sun starts to reach its peak, The tone of the dialogue switches from that of nostalgia to the harsh reality of today, discussing a case where he had found a man that had killed his wife just for the sake of killing. As the tone switches, so do the shots of the landscape. The audience, as we can see here, begins to see more of a harsher, more barren, empty landscape up until we can see Chigurh right here being arrested. We can kind of see there's a lot more emptiness to the landscape. It's a lot more barren and empty, kind of representing this harsh character of Chigurh and the harshness of organized crime.
And go out and meet something I don't understand.
The scene ends as Chigurh is being driven off in the back of a police car into this darkness, into the emptiness, and into the overshadowing of evil of the mafia and organized crime. In this scene, the audience meets the character of Llewellyn, an old Army Vietnam vet who lives a rough life and happens to stumble upon a drug deal that has gone wrong. At the beginning of the scene, which unfortunately is not shown, we see that he's hunting and the audience sees a wide, empty landscape overshadowed by a large, ominous cloud and a rough, rocky terrain. But as he discovers the drug deal that has gone wrong, we start to see a more open and more of a barren landscape while as he approaches this cliffside, rocky cliffside overlooking the deal. We keep seeing shots of this rockiness entering within the shots and within the cuts, kind of representing more of the harshness that he's about and the violence that he's about to see. As he approaches, we start to see more of a darker tone in the shots and within the landscape. We start to see more clouds overlooking and brumbling over the landscape and everything that in the scene itself. As he approaches, we do see some vegetation, but however, this vegetation is dead, representing as well the death that has just occurred and that he's rummaging through at the moment. In a way, the way the landscape is used here, as we can see, kind of represents the way is very similar to the way Francis Ford Coppola ended his film Godfather Part 2, where we see Michael sitting alone, just as we see Llewellyn venturing alone within this landscape and within this scene and within the layout. The scene ends as Llewellyn enters a car just as a storm is forming overhead, and leaving him this emptiness and loneliness, leaving with his thoughts representing that of this kind of a capitalistic society of the mafia and the organized crime today.